warm business stories like this really inspire me. That is what I am sharing on this episode of the show. It's called Lessons from a Fast Food Titan. It is at the top of the entrepreneur subreddit, and it's just a warm business mentorship, being generous with your time story. I found out last night that a man who briefly mentored me passed away. I'd like to tell you the story. I had read Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, and the chapter on overcoming gatekeepers. I was reading a book about the founding of Domino's Pizza called Pizza Tiger, and it was mentioned a Domino's franchisee who worked his way from delivery driver to one of the most successful franchisees of all time. I Googled the man and found some references to his LLC, and using Tim Ferriss's tips, I guessed his email address. The tip was finding the naming conventions within organizations. And then I sent him an email. I've done that too and gotten advice from great people because of it. The story continues. Surprisingly, he replied and we started exchanging emails. He gave me some advice over email and one day he gave me his phone number. We started conversing by phone. After a few phone calls, he told me point blank, I usually charge a lot of money for consulting and I've honestly given you a lot of my time for free, so I think we need to stop talking. The author writes, I actually wasn't offended by this and was just grateful for the time that I got with him. About a year later, when I was struggling in my franchise restaurant, I got a random call from him. He lived in the deep south, but summered in Michigan and said he was passing through Tennessee and wanted to stop and see my operation. On his own dime, he got a hotel across the street from my restaurant, and we basically spent 2 full days together. Him reviewing my operations, coaching me on how to improve. I learned he had hundreds of Domino's stores and they did more than $70 million a year in revenue. He had them for like 40 to 50 years. He owned his own castle in Michigan. Seriously, a literal castle that he and his wife restored. He charged me nothing and was so helpful and encouraging to me. Learning of his passing yesterday at age 77 took me back to that moment when this man, who had immense wealth, took time out of his life to impart a little wisdom from his 50 years in franchising on a hungry, broke, and eager first-time franchisee, all because I sent him an email out of the blue a year before. With this story, I offer a few observations. Number 1, people want to help other people. Number 2, never ask for money from someone you don't know well, but don't be afraid to ask for advice. Number 3, as an entrepreneur, the days may feel long, but life is short. I vow to pour a little of my wisdom into an enterprising young person one day to pay it forward for what this man did for me. Rest in peace, Richard. And the comments for this post, again, the post is called Lessons from a Fast Food Titan. I'll share it in the description for this episode. The comment section is pretty good too. The original poster adds, and he says, it was really unexpected because this guy had pretty much cut me off after the first time when he said I usually charge. And we only talked by phone a few times per year. So him showing up, it was just an impromptu kind act. I was talking to someone through Twitter DMs last night who had also been in the early Domino's organization, who happened to be a partner with this guy who passed away. I told him of the story and he told me that Richard was the most generous with his time of anyone that he'd known. Such a small world to have a random Twitter interaction and be just 1 degree separated from this same person. Somebody put in one of my favorite Steve Jobs quotes. Steve Jobs said, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this was in his biography, the Walter Isaacson bio, which if you haven't read is so amazing. I've never found anybody that didn't want to help me if I asked them for help. I called up Bill Hewlett when I was 12 years old. Hi, I'm Steve Jobs. I'm 12 years old. I'm a student in high school. I want to build a frequency counter and I was wondering if you have any spare parts I could have. He laughed and he gave me the spare parts and he gave me a job that summer at Hewlett Packard and I was in heaven. I've never found anyone who said no or hung up the phone when I called. I just asked. And when people ask me, I try to be responsive to pay that debt of gratitude back. Most people never pick up the phone and call. Most people never ask. And that's what separates sometimes the people who do things from the people who just dream about them. I'll share a personal story. This was way back at the end of 2017. Me and one of my longtime co-founders now, his name is Ram Berrouet. Ram is crushing it. He's raised $17 million for a debt relief app. We founded Reverb together. We made the first video game in blockchain together. We invented Play to Earn. It was him, me, and a few other friends. We've done lots of projects together in the past, but this was within only a few months of first meeting. And him, me, and another friend, Brian, we went to this blockchain and government event at Fordham University in Manhattan. And the event was crazy. I actually think I met a lot of people who I stayed in touch with at the event. And then after the event, it was late. I think it was around 9 p.m. or something. And I was looking at my notes before this from that event, but I didn't write down the exact times. After the event, we got food from the Whole Foods at Columbus Circle. And then we were walking and we were talking and we were vibing. I remember we were vibing. And this kid comes up to us, this random kid dressed completely like, not even a kid, young adult, looked very scruffy. And he just heard us vibing and he wanted to be part of the party. And so he came up to us and asked us what we were talking about. And I wanted to continue vibing and planning for the future, because that's what we were vibing and planning for the future, talking about what we learned from this event and how it was going to transform what we were doing. And Ram, and I always remember this, Ram stopped and sat down with the kid and they sat on a bench and Ram gave this kid like 15, 20, I don't know, maybe even 30 minutes just answering the kid's questions. And Ram had already had a bunch of successes at that point. And it was one of those super small things, one of those super small gestures that are just so nice. You just remember it forever. Ram could have talked to the guy for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, could have answered a few questions and then been nice and kept walking. But he sat with him for like 15 to 30 minutes. And if ever I feel like being dismissive towards somebody, I think about that story and then I stop myself, usually, I hope, from being dismissive. When you do those types of things for people, those people pay it forward, but also the people around you, they see it and they pay it forward. It's not a gesture that affects one person. It's a gesture that affects many, many people. So one more story from Richard in this Reddit thread. Rest in peace, Richard. One more story. And somebody said, great story. What was the best advice you got from Richard? And the original poster said he was really big on customer service. I really like this. He was really big on customer service. And as such, he placed a lot of value on his employees. I once observed a different entrepreneur who was fairly successful say nasty things about employees, like they were the worst part of owning a business. Richard was the total opposite. He believed your employees were the most valuable asset to your business and believed in bonuses / profit sharing and promotions when they did well. That has always stuck with me. Another person said, did he mention any specifics on his profit sharing structure? It seems like this would be a good way to incentivize employees. And the original poster responded, Domino's used to do 20% of profit for store managers. So that went into a pool and then managers could get up to 20% of profit when they met or exceeded their numbers. Actually, there was one more comment that I liked in here. So the original poster said, people often dismiss franchise businesses as not really entrepreneurial, but having lived it, I disagree. You key on consistency and great service, which is very smart. Those over time are some of the best marketing you could ever have. I really, really agree with that. I mean, that is why this is episode 448, doing this show 448 days in a row. And I try to answer and get back to so many people. And it brings me a lot of joy as well. It brings me meaning. So another great episode down. Hope this brought people some happiness. Hope this brought people some joy. Someone is asking you questions. Don't blow them off. Actually, I'll say one more thing. To everyone who reaches out to me over DM or leaves a message on my videos, it's just one of the nicest things. Sharing gratitude with somebody else. Just like this author did on Reddit with this post for Richard. I think things like this are so cool. That's what I got for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. I will talk to you again tomorrow. Bye now.